Welcome to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast for this Thursday, July 3rd, 2025. And we're here, as you know, as we talk about different things having to do with being Catholic in the real world. We're not here to talk to you about any kind of pious platitudes. We're here to speak to those who are looking to, how do I live my Catholic faith in the real world, and how do I not take myself too seriously in doing that? And that's an important consideration. So you're not going to find us listed or even maybe accepted among the more commonly known Catholic podcasts. But you are going to find us here, and we're speaking to the people who are simply trying to live their Catholic faith or may have walked away from the Catholic faith because they didn't feel they were accepted. So why don't we talk about that? And that's what we do here. We do that every single day for about a half an hour, and we start with either the first reading of the daily Mass, or even the theme of the daily Mass. And today we are looking at the feast day of St. Thomas the Apostle, also known as Thomas the Doubter, but I don't consider him a doubter. And we'll talk about that as we go along, because this is the classic example that we can all use of the person who discovers that God does not meet his expectations. And if you look at the Gospels, there are plenty of stories where God does not meet the expectations or Jesus does not meet the expectations of his disciples. He exceeds them. And that's a fascinating aspect. This is one of the most important part of living the faith, that if we're going to live the faith, we have to understand that God is bigger than us, as the saying goes, for our thoughts are greater than for my thoughts are greater than your thoughts. My ways are greater than your ways. And so we understand how that works. And when we realize that, we have our expectations of God, and God may turn around and do things that exceed them. And we clearly see that a lot of times in the gospel. As a matter of fact, that passage comes from Isaiah 55, or it's based on Isaiah 55. My thoughts are not your thoughts. And we can't see a more typical example of that reality than we see in St. Thomas. Now, of course, one of the things we have to understand is St. Thomas was not at the time St. Thomas. Well, who was he? They all called him Thomas, the twin, right? The name means twin. Well, actually, he wasn't a saint, because no one is a saint until after they die. Even St. Francis pointed that out back when he was just known as Francis. He pointed that out. He says, no. You have to wait until someone has completely lived their life before you make a judgment on whether or not they are a good model. That is a paraphrase. That's not what he actually said, but you can see where I'm coming from. And so there we understand that St. Francis is an example of this, and we're looking at with Thomas. So we have to understand he's not St. Thomas at this time. He is simply Thomas. Now, if you don't know the story, and I'm sure you do, but anyone who may have tuned in and said, well, what's the story of Thomas the Doubter? Jesus resurrects from the dead, and he appears to 10 of the remaining 11 disciples. Well, where's the 12th? That was Judas, and Judas is out of the picture now. So there we see that he appears to 10 of the remaining disciples. So Thomas is not there. So what happens is, when he comes back, he's out on an errand or something. When he comes back, he goes, oh, he's seen the Lord. He resurrected. It's so wonderful. This is great. And he goes, I don't believe you. And you know what? Until I put my fingers in his hands and my hands in his side, I'm not going to believe you. Now, many people say, well, obviously he doubted that Jesus resurrected. No, he was angry that Jesus did not act the way he expected him to act. Remember, they were all expecting Jesus to become the new king of Israel. He was going to become the new David, and David is obviously the great king of Israel. He was the greatest of all kings. If you are here in the United States and you are a Republican, then who is the person you consider the greatest president? Most Republicans will say Reagan. If you are a Democrat and you're thinking who is the greatest president as a Democrat, I'm talking over the past 100 years, that would be FDR. Now, that's kind of the attitude that you see where the people are saying this is going to be, Jesus is going to be the new King David. And they're all excited about this. And that doesn't pan out. So that was their expectation. But what does Jesus do? He always or often exceeds their expectations. And in the case of Thomas, he hasn't done that yet. We're going to be back on the other side of the break, and we'll talk more about the experience of Thomas the Doubter. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast.
You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452.
That's 617-297-7452.
617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try.
617-297-7452, 617-297-7452.
We're back, and we're talking about St. Thomas. So what happens is, again, you have to understand this. And this is key to the whole story. It's really important. Jesus dies. So once he dies on the cross. What are all their plans for being part of the brand new royal court? They're gone because they were expecting him to become the king. He dies, and therefore he's not the king. This is not going to be the new King David. He is not going to return the sovereignty to Judah. He's not going to restore Israel. He's not going to cast the Romans out. And this is all the expectations of Thomas. And then what happens is when Jesus dies and resurrects, and the other apostles discover this, but Thomas doesn't. He doesn't appear to Thomas because Thomas is away. And what does Thomas say when he comes back? I don't care. Because you can tell me that he raised from the dead, but he's still not going to become the king. And so I really don't care. This was my expectation, and he disappointed me. Therefore, I don't believe. Really simple. Now, why is that important? Because he refuses to believe. Now, look at it this way. How many times does God not meet your expectations? And you turn around and say, well, if God exists, this wouldn't have happened. I always remember the story of a friend of mine. He was in radio with me, and then he left radio, went out to Hollywood. I don't know where he is today. But and he's probably working behind the scenes and all that. But, great guy, refused to believe in God. And I said, why do you refuse to believe in God? And he said, well, I was 12 years old and my grandmother was dying. And I prayed to God to make sure that my grandmother, to heal my grandmother so that she wouldn't die. And she died. Therefore, God does not exist. Again, look at that God didn't meet his expectations. But you can look at that as an adult and say, well, yeah, but, how do we know that this was in God's plan for her to get better? And one of the things I teach at funerals, and this is an important consideration, and if you're dealing with children who are having a problem with the loss of a grandmother or grandfather or whatever, what is it that we believe? We believe in eternal life. So what happens to the person who dies? They get called to be with Christ. And that's one of the things I teach. Now, there is precedent for this in the Bible, and it long precedes Thomas. It's the story of King Saul. And I always tell the story at funerals. King Saul he was the first king of Israel, and he is known to have made a lot of mistakes. I'll leave it at that. And so what happens is he's got a battle coming up. Now, he has angered God because they took things from a conquered nation they weren't supposed to. The word that is used is booty. So they took booty from conquered nations. I think that's illegal even today. If I were back in the Navy and we conquered, or, we overtook a city someplace, and we went in as the sailors on the ship and started grabbing things from the city, that would be illegal. Well, it's similar. I mean, apparently he took the spoils of war, and this angered God. And so God said, no, I need another king. He didn't say it to him, but he said it to his prophet, Samuel. Well, in any case, there was a big battle coming up. And obviously, Saul was worried about the battle, and he goes and he breaks a law in Judaism. He goes and consults what we would call today a psychic. So he goes and consults a psychic. Now, that is forbidden in Judaism. It's forbidden in Christianity, too. But he does it. And when she sees him, he is the king of Israel. And she's like, you should not be here. You are the king. I'm in the presence of the king. And he says, you're right, but I am the king, and you're going to do what I say. And then he says, raise Samuel. And Samuel, who died, I forgot to tell you that little part I forgot to tell you. Samuel died. Samuel was his prophet. And Samuel was the voice of God to him. Well, Samuel dies. So he says, because he needs to know what to do. And so he says, raise Samuel. Well, when the witch of Endor is her name, when she raises Samuel, he is not happy. And the first words out of his mouth are, who raises me? And then he looks over and sees Saul's. Oh, it's you. So what I always explain in funerals is, why isn't Samuel happy? Well, he's not happy because he doesn't want to be back. He was fine where he was. And this is something I teach children, when we're at a funeral and you see a child that's really upset. I teach it from the altar, from the pulpit. I say, why was he upset? Because he was happy where he was. We're going to talk more right after this.
You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452.
That's 617-297-7452.
617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try.
617-297-7452, 617-297-7452.
Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at CatholicAudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back, and we're talking about the story of King Saul and Samuel. So Samuel is not happy that he has been raised, and King Saul, asks him a question. But why isn't he happy? He's happy where he was. So then I also explain is, if your grandmother or grandfather or whomever is happy where they are with Christ, do you want them back? And the answer always is no. And this is the important thing to look at. This is our understanding that this is that whole reality. This is what funerals are all about. It's praying to the Lord and saying, this is our beloved. Make good on the promise you made at their baptism. Come follow me and I will lead you into eternal life. And that's that whole story. This is make good on that promise. Now, I know there are some people in the more traditional circles that will say, oh, no, we're not supposed to say that. We don't know. The person has to go through judgment. Let it go. let it go. That's all in the hands of God. It's an old saying within Catholicism. We leave it in the hands of the mercy of God. So, you know, in theory, what people are saying when they do that is right. But if you want to make that statement during a funeral, good luck to you. And you notice I said good luck. There's nothing Christian about the term good luck. So good luck to you. So you understand that. This is an important consideration. Well, so what we're looking for in that story about that friend of mine who prayed for his grandmother to get better, but she died, is God had a bigger plan. God's desires and God's will far exceeds our plans. And that's the important thing, our wishes, our desires. So keep that in mind. So what happens is we see that with Thomas. Thomas is now upset that Jesus died on the cross. All his plans are gone. But what happens is once he sees Jesus resurrected and does exactly what Jesus says, now he understands that God's ideas and plans are, and his answer to prayer is greater than our expectations. Do you see that? Do you see how that works? And this is an important consideration. So there are many people that'll say, well, I don't believe in God because of this, that, and the other thing. Okay, and I gave you one example. Or another example people will say all the time is, well, if God existed, then our world would be a lot better place. Well, why is our world the way it is? And our world is the way it is because of sin. And who commits sin? Of course, everyone does. And where does sin comes from? My world, my way. And you can see that, you know, people are worried right now about a nuclear war breaking out because of what's going on between the Ukraine and Russia. They're afraid of a nuclear war. But how do we prevent a nuclear war from happening? We prevent a nuclear war from happening by telling people, don't start a nuclear war, and let them understand that this is a really bad idea and go along with it. And if they don't go along with it, what do you call that? You call that sin. Do you understand? So if we went down the path of a nuclear war, you can say, well, where is God in all of this? Well, God was there saying, don't start a nuclear war, and you didn't listen. God was saying a long time ago, don't do this. Don't build nuclear weapons, and you didn't listen. And who else was saying that? Just about everybody. Do you know when the first bomb dropped on Hiroshima, the first of the two atomic bombs? One of the headlines, just to show you how bad people don't think. One of the headlines was that this same power can give you electric power in your backyard. And you look at what happened at Hiroshima and go, I don't want that in my backyard. But that was literally, you go back and look at some of the headlines, you will see that this same power, what you just saw happen in Hiroshima, can generate electricity in your backyard. I don't want it to generate electricity in my backyard. And now people wonder, why are there so many concerns about nuclear power? Because the first time people saw nuclear power was that they saw an atomic bomb destroy an entire city. And when it destroyed an entire city, they said, we can put this in your backyard. I don't want it in my backyard. I don't want it even near me. True story. I when I was in the Navy, someone asked me if I would be willing to work with nuclear weapons. And I said, no. And they said, why not? And it's basically a selfish idea. But I said, because if I work with nuclear weapons, I could press the button, have 5 people left on the planet, and of those 5 people, 4 of them look to me and say, you're the one that pushed the button. So I don't want anything to do with that. And literally the person who asked me was an officer in the Navy, and he said, no, these wouldn't be big nuclear bombs that would only be the size of the Hiroshima bomb. And I was shocked that that he said this, just that kind of thinking. Well, no, it's not that big of a bomb. That was big enough. And I looked at him and I said, just probably my jaw just dropped. And I looked at him and I said, sir, that killed 100,000 people in 4 seconds. No. And you see that attitude. So you can say, well, if God existed, there wouldn't be nuclear war. We wouldn't have to worry about nuclear war. If God existed and we listened to God, we would have never have bought atomic or built atomic bombs in the first place. If God existed and we listened to God and we all did what God said and we listened and heard what he said and did this whole thing, that we would be living in a world of peace. But you don't listen. Therefore, because of sin, this is the trouble we have. So you say, well, if I was God, I'd build a better world. Do you really think you can? There's a good answer to that, and I'll talk to you about it on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast, and we will be right back right after this.
You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452.
That's 617-297-7452.
617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try.
617-297-7452, 617-297-7452.
So anyway, Frank Sheed was this real powerful evangelist, the Catholic evangelist. Many people don't realize that people think that Catholic evangelists are fairly recent. No, they've been around for a long time. Some of your saints were evangelists, and Frank Sheed was this great evangelist who evangelized a lot in New York. I think he's originally from not San Francisco, from Australia. And one of the things that he would often talk about is trying to preach about who God is and everything else. And whenever someone yelled out and said, I could build a better world than this, he would respond, just create a rabbit. That's all I ask. Just create a rabbit. And of course, what's he saying is, yeah, you say you could build a better world, but can you really? Because you can't create anything. And we understand that God created the world. Now, do we understand it within the context of 6 days and everything else? Not necessarily. And people will tell you, this is part of that spoon feeding thing I was talking about. People will tell you, well, you have to believe the world was made in 6 days. Actually, you don't. And even Pope Benedict XVI brought that out when he said in the homily for was it 2011 Easter Vigil? He said, this is a paraphrase, that Genesis is not a mechanistic account of the creation of the world, right? So you've got these people who will say, that they could build a better world. And Frank Sheed would say, well, fine, but I'd just rather see you create a rabbit right now. And obviously that's not going to happen. And that's a powerful thing to realize. Actually, God created a wonderful world. We're the ones that keep getting in the way. And again, you can say, well, if God is so great, why do we have nuclear weapons? We have nuclear weapons because people created nuclear weapons because they weren't listening to God. And, that whole bit. Because, think of it. Just think of this idea. Someone says, hey, we could build a bomb. And people think like this, as I explained earlier. Think of this. We could build a bomb that can kill 100,000 people in 4 seconds. Think how wonderful that is. People actually think like that. And everyone, not enough people turned around and said, what? What do you want to do that for? People actually sit in rooms in universities, smartest people in the world, saying, we could do that. We could come up with this, and think of that. Anytime you hear of a new weapon of any type, a brand new weapon, anytime you hear of a new weapon that's like this crazy, destructive, everyone is terrified of it, someone, someplace, in some probably university, or maybe in somewhere in the Pentagon or somewhere, or their equivalent in other countries said, hey, it would be cool? What if we did this? among the other scary weapons that's out there is taking uranium that has been used, so it's still radioactive, but it's been used, and using it to make bullets. Someone came up with that. We could use that uranium from control rods, or whatever they use for control rods, I don't know. Control rods, we can make them bullets. Someone thought like that. Do you understand? Someone thinks like that. And then people turn around and say, well, God could have created a perfect world, but he didn't. No, he could have created a perfect world, but he put you in it. And people like you, or whoever, people like us is a better way of putting it. There are people like us who go, it would be a great idea. What if we, and come up with this incredibly scary weapon? Unbelievable. I mean, let's look at this for a second. Right? We all think of monsters. Like, think of Godzilla. Right? Godzilla, the scary monster, or King Kong, scary, the whole bit, this whole scary monster, or whatever the monster may be. But that monster, we understand, was created apparently by God, but comes from something, but we didn't create it, right? That's the nature of the monster. I don't know. Maybe Godzilla has some kind of a nuclear background. I don't know. But you understand, we didn't create that. So, but those monsters aren't half as scary as some of the creations that we make, because we're turning around and going, hey, wouldn't that be a great idea? Let's build a bomb that can kill 100,000 people in 4 seconds. All of a sudden, just like that. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah can turn around and be upset with God. The people who see the effects of these stupid ideas can't, because they come from humans making stupid ideas. We're going to talk more on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. We'll be right back right after this.
You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452.
That's 617-297-7452.
617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try.
617-297-7452, 617-297-7452.
Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at CatholicAudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back, and we're finishing our program talking about doubting Thomas. And as we can see, Thomas discovered one of the things that I was saying, that in fact, we see that Jesus beats his expectations, Thomas's expectations. So he's expecting Jesus to be the new king of Israel, be another David. If we were living during this time, we might say, hey, there's a new Reagan coming, or a new FDR, or a new Abraham Lincoln, or a new George Washington. And what he discovers is that Jesus is offering something greater. We see the same thing, by the way, with the story of Lazarus and Martha and Mary. Martha and Mary want Jesus to heal Lazarus. He never shows up. Lazarus dies. And what does he do? He answers their prayers, but in a bigger way. He raises Lazarus. And one of the things I've been thinking of, would Lazarus talk about having a near-death experience? That's an interesting thing to reflect upon. In any case, we are looking at this reality of this whole thing of this feast of St. Thomas the Doubter. Maybe one of the things to think of during the day is, when has God met your expectations, exceeded them? And when did you say, I prayed for this and it didn't happen, and maybe ask the Lord the reason why. In any case, we trust in the Lord on this day. And as I say, this isn't Thomas the doubter. This is Thomas the, hey, you didn't do and meet my expectations. And then he discovers, oh, in fact, Jesus exceeded his expectations. We're going to talk more tomorrow, and we will see you then.